Christos, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to actually properly see you again. I've written a lot about you actually, which is very interesting. So I think I know my background, but yeah, it's good to speak to you today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I truly appreciate being here and the opportunity to speak with you.
We're obviously here for a reason. I want to talk about your fantastic album, Kung Fu Action Theatre. But specifically, we want to talk about the fact that you are releasing that on a vinyl press, aren't you? Which, that tends to, it's very interesting what's happened to vinyl, actually. It's had a resurgence finally in the past few years, which we might get into later. But you're putting out on a vinyl press, aren't you, via your label Honest Music? Tell me a bit about that. Why did you decide to do that? This is the first time Honest Music has done a vinyl release as well, isn't it? So
Yes, it is. As you mentioned, it seems to be a new trend, or I should say an old trend that's coming back in music. And, I grew up a product of the 60s and 70s. And so I was collecting vinyl as a young adult into my adult years as well. But just to be able to finally press one of the releases to vinyl, it's actually kind of like things going full circle because I've been doing recordings and releasing projects now for about 25 years, and to finally press it to wax, as we say here, it's really kind of an exciting moment and kind of a milestone, I would say, in the course of the years in production. So really thankful. And the project is very, very unique and very special. So this is the perfect album to be releasing as our first vinyl for Honest Music.
and how long is the process going to take to kind of press it from start to finish? When are we expecting that to be out, hopefully?
Very good question. I have no prior experience in this, so we'll see. I don't know if there's any hiccups along the way when it comes to pressing vinyl. I know it can happen with other manufacturing CDs and such. We'll see. I would say probably within a month or two. So I would say safely by November, we should have the album pressed and ready to go.
It's very exciting, actually, because you said about how Kung Fu Action Theatre, the album, is kind of a perfect release to put to vinyl. I would emphatically agree with that, because the album itself is, for people watching at home who may not be aware, Kung Fu Action Theatre is a wholly instrumental album. It's this glorious, I suppose, smorgasbord of influences. You have tidbits from reggae, tidbits from soul. We have Chinese influences and instrumentation, which we'll touch on later. And it's wholly instrumental. There's classical elements in there as well, which again we'll touch on. But it's this kind of sweeping project, which the way it's been arranged, and as well the brilliant mixing by our mutual friend Tippy, Tippy I grade, lends itself naturally to the kind of sound and the, well, I don't know, for me it's emotion, the kind of sound and the resonance and the emotion that vinyl brings. We're going to sound quite old, Christos, but you can't replicate vinyl, can you? In any way, shape, or form, really. You hear it in on albums sometimes where producers try and replicate the sound and the feel. It's not actually the same as having an actual, as you say, the wax in your hand, is it? And this album is perfect, I think, to lend itself to that. Why do you think the album is well suited to vinyl?
Well, many reasons still. One being that it's very unique in all of the works that I've done and been involved with as well. Beyond my own productions, even projects I've taken part in. This project is very unique in that I really wanted to incorporate not just Chinese instruments, but kind of the sensibility and approach that they have in playing these instruments, which is very different from Western music. So it's kind of a combination of East and West. And, reggae was the perfect kind of medium ground to combine these these two elements. You also mentioned classical music, which was also kind of a bit of the project as well, being that I did a couple of classical remakes of old classical songs and just felt that that would be well suited to the project as well. Um, but I think that it's just one of these things. It will stand out in a record collection. Before I started producing music, I was a DJ, and I used to actually do mixtapes and to spin records. And the process of putting together a playlist requires things that are very different, and kind of mixing emotions and feelings. And I think that this album has a very distinct emotion and very distinct feeling to it, without any words. And so the music itself kind of delivers that feeling and that message. And so it was just perfect fit, in my opinion.
As you say, no words. It is an entirely instrumental album. What was the thought process and decision making behind making this sweeping instrumental piece?
Well, I really wanted the instruments to kind of carry the message. Um, I always was fascinated, as a kid. I grew up in a household where both my parents were teaching music and also involved as opera singers in music for my entire life. And they would tell us stories as kids. So, for instance, my father would put on a classical record and he would say, "This is the scene from such and such," and he would describe the storyline. And you'd say, "Do you hear the horses running?" And it might be trumpets playing it, but it's meant to, you know, you're supposed to visualize the scene from these. And so I grew up, understanding that instrumental music can be telling a story. And, with that said, that one of the pieces that I did, the Edward Grieg composition in the Hall of the Mountain King, to me was always a fascinating piece of music because he's very clearly telling people something. And in my opinion, it was talking about the coming of war. And he's talking about this threat that's coming with this, and you're supposed to understand this just through the music, which to me is a very fascinating idea. And so I thought that would also be a perfect thing to include in the project, being that it's still relevant today, the same threat. And so, that one particular song, for instance, is really describing the incoming threat of war and the destruction involved with war. And so I felt that this was something that was a very important aspect of this album, was to kind of tell stories without any words.
It's extreme, I am a musician by trade, and it's no mean feat doing that either, to be able to express emotion or story or narrative very clearly and directly to a listener without the use of any kind of any words at all. It's a challenge, and your album does pull that off in its entirety. As you point out, especially the Grieg in the Hall of the Mountain King. You replicate his original vision perfectly, and of course build on it further than what it was and to the side of what it was. But it's no mean feat. Did it did it worry you at any point taking on a task like this? Because extremely difficult thing to pull off, which you have done, but very difficult to pull off as it's.
It was, I think the main concern was at one point finding there was one element that I really wanted to include, and that's the use of the erhu, which
Mm.
is an instrument, traditional Chinese instrument with two strings, basically, and it's played with a bow, very similar to a small cello or something like that. And I was searching for someone for quite some time, and I just wasn't finding the right person. And I knew this album needed that element. So that was one moment of concern where I was searching for an air hoop player. And lo and behold, I finally found someone out of Japan, and the guy is absolutely phenomenal. He really did an amazing job contributing, and it was kind of unique communicating with him because his English is not very good, and but he was very excited to take part in the project as he's, traditionally a classical player in Japan, and so for him it was very different. He could kind of, relax and something very different, which I personally love. I love hiring sometimes jazz players to come play reggae and other people who don't normally play this type of music. And I think it's an interesting experience for people to realize that it's really not as easy as some people may express. It requires quite a bit of discipline, and you have to play it exact and proper, or it does not work.
Exactly. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I do think there is this perception, and it's not, I don't want to sound rude, but it's not been helped in some respects by the advent of music streaming and the fact that anyone can do music now and anyone can put a song out. And there is a lot of subpar reggae out there where, where
Certainly
you
is.
where you
Um,
can notice that, yeah, maybe people haven't quite grasped just how complex it is to actually say to pull it off well and to make something really, really good is not that straightforward. I'm interested as well that you say your Japanese artist felt relaxed as such on this because he comes from a classical background, but also the fact that the influences of the Chinese instrumentation and then the way you took on the two classical pieces. The other one was Tchaikovsky, wasn't it? From Swan Lake.
yeah.
Um, it seems that reggae, and maybe this is just me, there's something about reggae which lends itself to anything, doesn't it? As you said, you when you get a jazz singer to come onto a reggae track, it's almost as if there's a universalism about reggae that you can take a classical piece of music or a piece of soul music or jazz influences, or in your case, Chinese instrumentation, and it blends with kind of the bubble rhythm and the one drop and all these musical devices that we know and love so well, and it blends with that perfectly. Why is reggae like that? That you can take anything within reason and put it onto reggae and it still seems to work.
Well, it's actually a very good question, but if you kind of break that question down
Mm-hmm.
to um, music to me is a language, and reggae is it's a very distinct dialect of music, and so it's almost as if it when I talk about this subject, it makes me think very often of these books they would put out when I was still in school, and it would be to summarize something. And so these kids would get these books to cheat in school. So instead of reading the book you're supposed to, you get I think it was a thesaurus or something that summarizes it for you. And I think that reggae is one of these things that if you know how to break it into certain elements and to chop it, or to count out the chord structure, it's almost as if you can convert just about any type of music into reggae by just it's not just simplifying it. Simplifying it is a part of the process, but it's then speaking that song within this language. So say with the bass guitar, bass to me in reggae is very distinct in the voicings and the language. And so you then would take this piece of classical or whatever type of music, and I think bass is really where a lot of that transition happens, and in the bass line. And the bass line then sets the tone between the rhythm and the chords. And so that's kind of the bridge between this movement that's happening with your drums and the chords that will then accompany. And so um, to me, that's the essential elements right there is it's with the bass line. And once you have that, that really kind of sets the mood or sets the tone in whatever direction you choose to go. But there's of course many ways of compiling a song. I don't always start with the bass line, but it is very much, I think, that bridge kind of between styles and connecting reggae with other styles.
And you mentioned bridge between styles, of course. Earlier on in your musical journey, I suppose you were involved in hip hop, I believe, weren't you? Tell me a
I
bit about a brief foray into hip hop, maybe.
Briefly, yeah, I was doing some sampling for years. I was involved with some people that I would uh, go to record stores, digging for samples and coming back and cutting them into loops. And as a musician, I would play parts that, people might chop into an MPC, and then they're playing it back off of pads, which was a very unique and interesting process that I just never really continued down that road. I did work with some hip hop artists, and it was a brief moment. So it was kind of, a few years that I just went right back into reggae, and I took what I learned in that time with me, and just um, it's not something that I incorporate that frequently, but every once in a while it can incorporate some of the things that I've learned.
So were in terms of your musicianship and your influences, were your parents a big influence on you then, as opposed to your kind of foray into hip hop? Because you mentioned earlier about how they explained how music can tell a story.
My parents, I was that my brother and I were those kids growing up that we didn't just get called home for dinner. They would sing us home for dinner. And so, and there were always people in my house learning music and learning to sing. And so, one of the influences it did have with me now as a vocalist is I do some of the exercises that they would do. And I would just remember them innately that, and so I ritualistically now go at least one point of the day, and it's my vocal workout time, and I just run through these exercises to keep my voice in shape. And so they did have an influence for sure.
I grew up and my dad was a semi-professional jazz musician.
Okay.
So I grew up and around, Louis Armstrong, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, all the kind of great jazz vocalists. And that kind of surrounded me. And it's interesting. I was very into kind of hip hop when I was younger. And then as I've got slightly older, that I've made the transition then to reggae almost. So it's you kind of go through life, and I don't think your musical tastes and your musical influences necessarily change. They just kind of develop, don't they, as such as time goes by.
Unless I find something totally new that I'd never discovered before, and I say, "Wow, that's incredible!" And I'm
Have you
immediately,
found anything like that?
oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I discovered Indian music.
Okay.
I first went to India a few years ago and was blown away by some of the traditional classical Indian music. It's incredible. It's
Is that your
it's
next project then?
maybe I won't count it out, but I won't say um, that I have that planned per se, but it would be something really incredible to do. It really would. Um,
And all of this, of course, under the umbrella of Honest Music, isn't it? Which is your label. You founded it in 2008. Was it around
yes,
that time?
yeah, I decided that it would be important to kind of create a label in putting out music. Also, it wasn't my intention initially to produce for other artists, but that kind of just happened as a result of getting involved with, you know, other musicians and artists along the way. And so it became a platform for not just my music, but for putting out some other music as well.
And what was the decision making process behind going solo, if you like, with a label?
Well, going solo in terms of my own music,
No, creating your own label. Again, it's quite a big
yeah,
undertaking.
I think that, through advice from people around me, in terms of publishing and putting things out there, I did not want to go through the process of trying to shop my music to existing labels and that kind of thing. Um, I've been around music for a long time, maybe 25, 30 years. And I've kind of seen how that process goes with other people who've, shopped for record deals, some who which have gotten them and some who did not. And I kind of knew I had to take a different route. I sort of knew I wanted to be free from that. Um, that which I saw from people, for instance, who did get record deals. They became, in a way, a commodity for the record label. And the record label's now telling you who to work with, where to go, what to record. They're even approving your music before you put it out. And there was no way I wanted to allow someone that much say over what it was that I was doing. And it's actually quite a blessing to be independent and to be putting out things independently. It's a difficult road. It's not always easy. You don't get a lot of the same opportunities as some other people, but you can create opportunities for yourself that sometimes will bring you into places you haven't imagined. And so I'm really thankful that I decided to take that journey independently and not go in search of some company to buy out my music and to join in the corporate world of
Yeah,
music.
I hear that a lot. There's a lot of artists I speak to have a similar sentiment when it comes to having their own label, or at least being on an independent label. And it seems reggae has become, well, not just reggae, Jamaican kind of music of Jamaican origin, Jamaican culture more broadly, has become more and more commercialized as the years have gone on in some respects. Especially, I speak to independent artists who have left Jamaica because of the fact it is now actually quite tightly controlled in terms of the industry over there. And while that means that the music can reach more people, I'm not sure if it's good for the culture overall or good for creativity overall that you do have these corporates or labels operating like corporates in some respects, kind of controlling things. I'm not sure that's necessarily been a good thing. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think it serves its moments.
Mm,
There's moments where it really applies and it works. Bob Marley is a perfect example, in my opinion, of an artist that, he really shaped reggae music in such a way that, you know, the whole world has been exposed. But I personally think that a very big part of that process for him was when he came to the United States and took part with a major record label. And in turn, what they did was to bring in people from Muscle Shoals and all these different, other elements you'd never expect. And this shaped that music in such a way that a very good friend of mine, Junior Marvin, he
mm,
was a rock guitarist from England and loves to tell the story how he had gotten an offer from Stevie Wonder the same day as he did Bob Marley and
mm,
chose to work with Bob. And, but think about it. You've now brought this rock musician from England over here to work with, one of the greatest reggae artists of all time. And it shaped the music. It changed the music. And
mm.
so for me, these are very important elements when they were doing development deals with artists. You really could shape and craft something incredible. But I don't see that as being a very predominant part of the music world today. They're not doing development deals with
No.
artists and putting them in the studio with flying musicians in from here and there. We have to take the initiative to try and do it ourselves. And so if you're fortunate enough to be able to, it's a blessing. And, independently now we can do things that people weren't able to many years ago. So there's kind of upswing of it and the downswing of it, so to speak. And I'm just really grateful that I've been able to pursue and accomplish as much as I have, and to reach as far and reach as many people, and collaborate with people as far and wide as I have.
Who have you collaborated with over the years? What's some of your highlights?
Oh, I'll tell you, quite a few. When I was young, I felt incredibly lucky. At the age of 23, I first met a guy by the name of Peter Broggs. And Peter and I became friends, and he hired me as a guitar player. And, as a 23-year-old kid, I'm out on the road with this guy who, I really looked up to. And that then opened doors for me as a young person to play with people like the Itals, and with Don Carlos was actually a really Don actually was a moment where it was really special, and that was a moment when I first met Don. I was playing with his group and took part in a record called 7 Days a Week, and so I was a big part of that album process, and that was a huge moment for me. But then, a little later, as I started to pursue as an independent artist, a great milestone for me was a song with Ake Becca, and
Mm.
was really blessed to, you know, do a collaboration with him. God, as well as with many people. I hate to mention one because it could overshadow another, and that's not necessarily fair. Um, but I would say with people like Don Carlos and Ake Becca, it was a real blessing and incredible moments. But right now I'm in a collaboration with a group from France that I think is phenomenal and feels like actually going to another level with the music. It feels like growth has occurred in this project. And as an artist, I feel like my writing even has kind of taken a little bit of a new level with this upcoming project. So,
And why? Who are these people, and why have they been so influential? Or can you not say?
well, it's a group from France called the Ligerians, and we have
Oh, of course, I know Nadia very well. So
okay. Yeah, so we have a single coming in a couple of months, which I'm really it for me it was so inspiring, the piece of music that I actually many pieces of music I received from them. But the first single, for instance, when I heard the song, it immediately made me think of Midnight, and it made me think of Akebeka, and was actually kind of a almost spiritual experience when the lyrics came for that song, because I often tell people it's like the process for me. When I feel a song is coming, I can feel it. I hear a piece of music and I say, okay, I'm going to write. And it's almost like taking a fishing line, and then like kind of, you set up before I cook, I usually set up all my utensils, all my ingredients, everything is there. It's ready. So I do the same thing musically, and everything's set up, everything's in order, incense burning, candles, things like this. And I feel like I take a fishing rod, metaphorically speaking, and I go into my yard and I throw it up into the sky and just see what I can catch from the elements around me. And for this one song, it felt like the words just came from nowhere, and it happened really fast. And those moments don't always occur the same way. But for this particular song, it was really fast. It's almost like I'm transcribing something that I'm hearing from somewhere. And even the melody, even just the way it fit the song, it was so natural, as it was as if it was already there. It's hard to describe, but so I feel that this project from top to bottom has been that kind of process. And so I'm really, really excited about that album that's coming.
I'm very excited you're working with the Ligerians.
Oh
They're
man,
fantastic. I've interviewed Nadia McAnuff a few times, who obviously has worked with them
yeah, I love
loads.
her album. Really,
Oh,
really.
brilliant! Yeah, great album. We spoke for hours about that. And yeah, it's a phenomenal piece of work. But the Nigerians, particularly, she waxed lyrical about them, and clearly there is something very special about them. For
Oh,
whatever reason, hard
they
to
they are
pinpoint.
like a perfect combination
Mm.
of the five-piece element of that group. That just it's once in a while you get a group like that where just all the elements fit so well together, and just the way that these five people work together is phenomenal to me. They're really one of my favorite groups. I don't say that lightly. I really feel that way.
Well, that is exciting, and I'm looking. You've thrown me off now. I'm really excited about that. That sounds
I
blooming
look forward to
brilliant.
playing it for you. It's a really great album.
No, I'm sure it's going to be excellent. That is great. And you mentioned Becky, and of course you worked with Tippy I grade a lot. Of course, associated with Zion I Kings. Another, for my money, they are the best, if well, one of the best production outfits that have been working in the past few
Unquestionably.
decades.
No doubt about it. Tippy to me is this is why I sought out Tippy years ago, is he to me is at the pinnacle of what's happening. But mind you, this is within roots reggae. And so, we're talking about the kind of, to me, traditional reggae, but roots and conscious reggae.
Yeah.
Reggae that comes from a place of consciousness and that represents a certain mindset and teaching. And I think he is, and Zion I Kings are just at, to me, the pinnacle of what's happening in conscious reggae right now for many years, actually.
No, I completely agree. You're you're working with some brilliant people, and you have worked with some brilliant people in your time over the course of yeah. I don't like calling it a musical career. I find it quite corporate,
I
I
just,
suppose. Actually, I don't want to say career. I don't like Journey because it sounds like we should be on American Idol or something. So over your time as a musician,
that's
is
good.
there we go. Is is there anything that you haven't kind of experimented with yet, or haven't done, or would like to venture into that may be on the cards in the future? What stones have not been overturned yet, as it were?
Oh, I mean, there's so many directions potentially to go that I think that the possibilities are really pretty wide open when it comes to that, especially with new technology and the things that we're able to do. Um, to me, to be quite honest, I've done so many records here, producing them by myself here at my studio on my own. Um, I might mix with someone, but I'll create a lot of times the music primarily on my own. I bring in some musicians to replay some parts and things. So I think that what I'm really looking forward to doing is getting out and performing more, doing more shows, doing the songs in front of an audience and getting up with a group. And so I'm glad to finally be working with a group of musicians that hopefully we can hit the road and we can start presenting the material. But otherwise, who's to say what?
This is no, no, this is the flip side of being a musician. You never know what creative path you're going to go down, do you? Yeah.
It's like predicting a dream. You
Mm.
never know what may come. Inspiration can be a real interesting thing that it might be something you never expected. Who's to say? I never thought that I would be doing this Chinese album and actually learning to play one of the instruments myself.
Oh, did
But
you do that as well?
yeah, I actually did.
Oh, wow.
That
Okay.
was kind of what started the project was when I had wanted to go down the road. I decided to purchase what's called a gusheng guitar from China, and it took about 3 months to come in the mail. But when it finally arrived, I sat that night and I unpacked this thing, and within 3 hours, I had it tuned, ready to go, strung up, tuned, and I had tuned it to a traditional Chinese tuning. And so my idea was to search through a bunch of music I'd been doing and see just if traditional tuning randomly fit any of the songs, which it did. And so actually that one's Far East on the album. That was the first song on the project that just kicked things off. So from there, what I did was to learn to adjust the tuning on the instrument, then to either do a scale or a chord for the rest of the songs on the album. And I had learned this many years ago playing lap steel guitar, that when you play a lap steel guitar, you'll tune it to the song, and you either tune it according to whether you want to use a chord or you want to use a scale. So if you're going to be playing notation, you'll do a scale. Sometimes I'll do four strings. So I have a slight notation and then a chord that I can play as well. So I had learned that technique by playing a little bit of lap steel guitar over the years.
And that is where Kung Fu Action Theatre came from then.
It was, yeah, that was the kickoff.
So and this is
So,
the thing, as you say about inspiration, your own, I suppose, inquisitive mind then led you to this place.
well, then I also met a woman by the name of Chow Tian, and she was introduced to me by my saxophonist, Brian Falkowski, and she is phenomenal at this instrument. She's a prodigy. And so all it took was one session with her, and that was very clearly we're gonna continue this and just keep it going. So I have to say, she was also a very huge contributor to this project.
Well, look, I mean, it's a fantastic album. It really is quite it's quite inspirational in terms of what can be done around reggae for my money, and quite groundbreaking in many respects as well. And it is really exciting of getting it onto vinyl. You said that should be available with September now, hopefully a couple of months.
Yeah, I think by November we should have everything
Okay.
sorted out. I've not gone through the process before, so much thanks to Gav Pause for helping to make that happen. He's kind of
Excellent.
assisting me in the process, and so we'll be placing some with him over in the UK as
Mhm.
well once it's done.
Brilliant. And just to wrap up, because we've been talking for quite a while now, actually, I didn't even realize, as
Happens, man.
it does happen. What's in store for Christos DC for the rest of this year? What have you got coming up? Because it's fall now, obviously. We say autumn over here, it's fall where you are. The year is beginning to draw to a close. Is there anything to look out for from you for the rest of the year apart from the vinyl?
Absolutely. Well, the vinyl's coming. I have, of course, the first release with the Ligerians. It's a song called Shadow of Perception. So
Okay.
keep your eyes open for that. Um, I also have a song with a producer from here in the States. Um, and his company's called King's Table, and we have a song that we'll be putting out as well as a single called "Some Never Get a Good Shot." And basically, it's a very lengthy title, but I like what the song talks about. It really is saying it's talking about people who don't get a fair chance, and that was also a song that really just kind of came out very quickly. And so those two things, and then the full length album probably by spring, maybe summer this upcoming year with the Ligerians.
I'm so looking forward to that. That sounds absolutely fantastic. Look, Christos, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you
And you
so
as well,
much.
brother.
It's been really enjoyable, and we look forward to not only the vinyl release of Kung Fu Action Theatre, but your work with the Ligerians as well. So, but for the minute, Christos, thank you for speaking to us. It's great.
Man, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate your time and really appreciate what you do, man. I really love your sensibility with your writing, man. You really tap in sometimes to things that I think people don't always put into words properly. So thanks for what
Oh,
you do as well, man. Really appreciate it.
That's nice. Thank you. Thank you very much. Lovely. Christos, that was great. Thank you.